Okay, so for this activity, we are going to be building on this idea that a full sentence needs a subject, verb and object by identifying the verbs in the following sentences. So guys, I want you to ask yourself for each sentence, what is the subject doing? In other words, what is X doing? So number one, the sun shone for 6 hours. So what's the sun doing? What's the subject doing? That's going to help us identify the verb. Number two, Rachel daydreams a lot. So what's Rachel doing? What's the verb in number two? Number three, visitors damage forest by causing erosion and disturbing wildlife. What are the visitors doing? Number four, scientists usually publish their findings in scientific journals. And number five, many people in poor countries depend on farming. So guys, for numbers 1 to 5, you've got to write down the verbs and ask yourself, what is X doing? So the teacher will just pause there and give you time to do that, and then we'll go through our answers together. Okay guys, so let's have a look at these answers together. So hopefully the teacher paused and gave you time to look. Number one, what was the sun doing, guys? The sun shone. What was Rachel doing? Brilliant, daydreams. Now in this one, I'll accept either of these three, but the main verb here is what are the visitors doing, guys, to the forests? They damage them. But they also do it by causing erosion and disturbing wildlife. So that was the tricky one of the three so far. Now number four, publish, and number five, depend. So if you look, all of those verbs are coming after the subject in that position of a subject, verb and object. Okay, so give yourself a mark out of 5. Brilliant. Now in this next activity, we're going to be looking for the subject. So if you remember, the subject is the person, the place or the thing. It's the who or what that's doing the action. So as I read each sentence to you, you're going to write down number one, what you think the subject is. So for example, we'd say number one, Ben watches the film. So who's the person, thing or place in that sentence? And then to double check, because you might say, well, Ben's a person, but the film's the thing. So which is the right one? So then we say, well, who's doing the action? So who's watching? Is it Ben or the film, guys? Yeah, it's Ben. So number one, Ben watches the film. And look, he's coming at the start of the sentence, like we would expect subjects to. So number one, Ben watches the film. The answer is Ben. What about number two? The car backed into the parking space. Who or what is doing the action in that sentence? Number three, Tall Point is a town. Who or what is the subject of that sentence? And number four, I intentionally threw the ball over the fence. Who or what is doing the action? Finally, number five, the horse ran round the field. Who or what or where is doing the action? Okay guys, so we'll just press pause there. Now for this one, you just have to write down the subject, guys. So you don't need the whole thing, but who's the subject? And we'll see each other in a minute for the answers. Right guys, so I do apologise, I don't know what's happened to the numbering here, but number one, Ben. Number two, the car. Number three, Tall Point. Number four, I. And number five, the horse. So give yourself a tick if you're right. Look at that pattern. All of those subjects clearly at the beginning of sentences. But if we were double checking, who's watching the film? Ben. Who or what was backing into the parking space? The car. What is a town? Tall Point. Who threw the ball over the fence? I did. And what or who ran around the field? The horse. Okay guys, brilliant. Now we're going to look at some slightly different rules. So we're just going to pause in a minute and give you a chance to write down this new set of rules, that sentences are made up of clauses. So one SVO unit that we've been looking at in the first part of this lesson is called a main clause. Extra detail added to a main clause is called a subordinate clause. Brilliant. So main clause, he was on his way home. The subordinate clause, the extra detail, when he saw an old friend. So guys, I just want you to write those down, and then we're going to look at the next page. So other things then. So sentences are made of clauses, but also phrases. A phrase is another part of a sentence which either doesn't have a verb or doesn't have a subject. So the phrase in the garden has no verb, there's no action, and there's no subject. It doesn't tell us who or what is in the garden, does it? We've just got this phrase, in the garden. So this is a phrase because it doesn't have a subject or a verb. So we're just going to pause there and we're going to write down a phrase is another part of a sentence which either doesn't have a verb or doesn't have a subject. Okay? Brilliant. Now, guys, as I talk you through this one, start wiggling your hands. I appreciate you've been writing a lot, so just give them a little warm-up. So either you can just quietly do pianos, circle your thumbs, just rest those hands as I talk you through this one. Okay, so sentences are made of clauses. We've got SVO units called main clauses. Extra detail is a subordinate clause. And we've got phrases. So in this activity, 1 to 5, you've got to decide which is the phrase and which is the clause. So how are you going to decide? You're going to read with me 1 to 5 and you're going to be thinking to yourself as I read, is that sentence? Is that a complete sentence? Is there a subject, a verb and an object? Or is it extra detail? Or is it not got a verb or a subject? And then it would be the phrase, wouldn't it? So number 1, lots of pencils. Number 2, bears with fur. Number 3, the teacher shouted. Number 4, trees sway in the wind. And number 5, a red apple on the desk. Now, guys, it does say here, copy the lines below and label them clause or phrase. I would say at this time, if you're getting quite close to the end of the lesson, just write down 1 clause or phrase. 2 clause or phrase. So don't copy out the whole line. You can just write down whether you think it's a clause or a phrase. And we'll look at the answers together in a minute. Off you go, guys. Remember, a phrase doesn't have a verb or a subject. Were you right, guys? Let's have a look. So number 1, lots of pencils, a phrase. It's got no subject, no verb. Number 2, bears with fur, another phrase. There's no verb in there, is it? Look at number 3 and 4, though. Both of these are main clauses because they've got the verbs. So if I said to you for number 3, what did the teacher do? They shouted. So that's the verb shouted coupled with the subject, making it a clause. Guys, in number 4, what do the trees do? Brilliant, they sway in the wind, making that a phrase. And what was on the desk? A red apple. Brilliant, so give yourself a mark out of 5. Now, this is our last task. Now, depending on how close we are to the end of the lesson, your teacher can either be really tight with time and give you the set amount of time between now and the end of the lesson, or you can have a bit more time to explore and expand your writing. So, this is our final challenge. Look at this lovely picture, okay, inspired by the documentary I was watching on Channel 5 about 9 amazing children growing up on a remote Yorkshire hill farm with their parents raising sheep. Now, we've got a subject and verb bank. Now, you can use these ideas. You can use these words. There's a word in here I would definitely challenge you to use. Or once I've explained the other criteria, you can just go for it and demonstrate your skills as a writer at this stage. So look at our subject bank, and each of these words relates to something in the picture. So the sheep, here they are. These are our herd of sheep. We've got a group of sheep. We've got baby lambs mixed in with their mothers. We've got horned sheep. We've got white sheep. We've got sheep with blue marks. We've got a beautiful collection of sheep. Now, to the left of the sheep, yep, in the background of the picture, I've called it the sea, but the more I look at this picture, I'm thinking this could actually be like a loch in Scotland or a lake. But I've said sea, but really we have this mysterious body of water. Okay, now our sheep then, to the left of them, is this sea. They are walking upon a road. So here's the road, the grey road that unfurls in front of them. They're trotting along the road, okay? And you can see we've got some greenery, and in the background a little bit further away, we've definitely got some things that could be called trees, hedges, bushes. But that word tree is to remind us we could even begin to think about all this lovely greenery in a minute. And hiding. Can you spot him? Hiding at the back here of our picture, we've got our sheepdog. Hello, sheepdog. Now, each of these verbs, again, is to help you think about creating that SVO structure in a minute. So, who would be the barker in this picture? Brilliant. The sheepdog barks. The sheep run, or the dog barks and runs. The sheep bleat. The trees grow. The sea waves. Now, this final one is a challenge verb for you. It's a beautiful word, unfurls. Now, if you want to picture what unfurls means, it's kind of like that moment where you shake out a blanket or you shake out your duvet and it unfolds, it unfurls. So you could talk about the road unfurls in front of the sheep. The sea unfurls in the background. It's a lovely challenge verb for your writing today, guys. Now, the actual task we're going to end with is to write 3 full sentences to explain this image. All your sentences must use the subject, verb and object because they're full sentences. However, here's the challenge element. One sentence must use when, the word when, to introduce a subordinate clause. So we could look at our word bank and we could say the sheep bleat when the sheepdog runs behind them. Now, is that the best sentence I've ever written? I don't know. I could probably be more creative. I could be more imaginative. But it is subject, verb and object, and it has used a when to introduce the other idea. So I'm ticking all Mrs. boxes. I'm pleasing Miss Deutsch. Well, I'm talking about myself now, but I'm meeting my criteria. Now, it says here, one sentence must use a phrase to tell us where something is in the picture. So if we look at that list of subjects again, we're going to be thinking about, well, where are they in the picture? So the sheep, where are they? On the road. The sea, in the distance. The road, underneath the sheep, in front of the sheep, unfurling across the scene. Where are the trees? In the distance, next to the sheep, far away. What about the sheepdog? Behind the sheep. So one sentence can use a phrase to tell us where something is. So we could say the sheep were walking on the road. So there's the phrase on the road telling us where the sheep are, and that's going to give us our where phrase. So guys, 3 sentences, all using subject, verb and object. 1 using a when to introduce a subordinate clause, and 1 using a phrase to tell us where something is. But I also challenge you to be as creative and descriptive as this picture inspires you to be, guys, okay? Enjoy the writing. Thank you for listening so well, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.